Hello, welcome to the other episode of What Can I Notice About My Students' Intrinsic Motivation when Implementing Activities and Expectations that Teach Metacognitive Strategies. I will be talking about my data and what I've collected and what I observed and just any data that I've just collected over time. So I'm teaching third grade in my student teaching class this year, and I've noticed that when I observed their peer collaboration, I created a sociogram, and a lot of the students, when given the opportunity to work together, I've noticed that a lot of the students gravitate towards individuals and gravitate towards already set groups, whereas there are individuals who actually work better alone. A lot of students have already formed groups and they do not break those groups. Sometimes they would float around, but oftentimes they stick together in those friend groups. And I've learned that through that, sociograms have shown that a lot of students collaborate or work better with people they're comfortable with. A lot of students are easily distracted in my classroom, so to increase intrinsic motivation, I would praise students or write affirmations on their desks, like I said in the last group podcast that we talked about. I also noticed that students cannot self-regulate in my classroom, and nor can they facilitate their own learning, which I think is important to implement in classrooms to build intrinsic motivation, is giving a self-assessment checklist for students to motivate them and really delve into their motivation. You could teach students how to reflect on their learning by going through the checklist, asking students, what do you know? What don't you know? How can you improve? I do that a lot with their behavior because my class struggles a lot with behavior management, and that's what my mentor teacher and I focus a lot on. In a math lesson that I taught, a lot of students don't follow the directions, or we're kind of just doing the lesson at their own pace rather than following whole group. And to motivate that kind of learning, I think it's important to keep students in check by observing them during independent work, telling them not to go ahead, or if they do go faster than other students because they work at different paces, giving them a go that they can move ahead, and then offering more support for students that do need help. I've also noticed that in independent work, students are more intrinsically motivated to finish first and finish as fast as they can. I think it's important to slow students down and let them know that finishing work as fast as you can is not the best work, and teaching them that working hard as their own potential is more important than doing work fast, which I feel like a lot of students in my class do not really reflect on. They want to finish first, they want to finish the fastest, and then sit around and take a break. So I think when students are given the opportunity to self-reflect and also have maybe a reward for finishing their best work, I think students are more motivated that way. And also teaching students how to regulate their own emotions. I think that's also really important to learning as well, because when students have big emotions, they're not able to learn their best. I think also offering more collaboration or group work is really important instead of just regular independent work or worksheets. I think having opportunities to collaborate, discuss ideas, work with groups, make projects, and really tie in the material to real life examples is really important, because a lot of students don't understand why we're learning the material we are learning in class. And when students are given the opportunity to work together in groups, it actually gives them a sense of belongingness. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belongingness is, I think, the second or third level of the pyramid. And when students feel belonged in a group, they actually tend to feel safer, and their guards are down, and they feel more motivated to learn as well. So I think given more opportunities to work together, build connections, and collaborate ideas helps students build their intrinsic motivation, instead of just telling them, do this worksheet and finish it, and because it's very dry material when students do that. And also, when students are given more opportunities to collaborate, they work together by learning and bouncing off of each other's ideas, and they wouldn't get distracted easily, because from personal experience, working individually can be very boring and can be very exhausting at times. Also, I interviewed some students with their intrinsic motivation, and I was able to notice that a lot of students lack that. They have more extrinsic motivation rather than intrinsic motivation. They don't see the need for school, or they don't see the need to learn the material they are presented with. I think this stems from a lack of self-confidence. So I think being able to teach students how to talk positively about themselves, motivate themselves by themselves, teaching them how to motivate themselves is really important. And I think that'll also give them more motivation, rather than just telling them, you have to do this, you have to do this. I think a lot of students lack a lot of self-esteem, especially when they're not getting it at home. So I think as educators, it's important for us to constantly give them the praise and the support they need, and the encouragement. I think students do better that way, and even pulling out in small groups. I've noticed that pulling out students that struggle more into smaller groups help them facilitate their learning, and also it helps the educator know where to help, where to, I guess, dig into the topic more. And yeah, so with all this data, and with all this interview and observations and the sociogram, my group was able to explore more about intrinsic motivation, and also explore why students need intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. We've also studied that extrinsic motivation doesn't go well in the long term, and it actually leads to a lot of students not being able to do a good job in their future work position, especially when it's low pay or the benefits aren't good as good. Students in the future would only find jobs that are high paying. Whereas if you intrinsically motivate students, they don't really care about the high pay, but just want to do a better job instead. So if a teacher would intrinsically motivate students with prizes and just constant currency, like teacher currency, they'll actually motivate students to want a high-paying job in the future, and they will build a connection between doing work equals good pay. So we've noticed that encouraging students positively is more important, and motivating their self-esteem is really important. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast.